Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to Paul for that fantastic session on Dashboard Server. Up next, we're going to be talking about the ultimate SCOM console. I am your host, Ashley Thompson. I'm the lead solutions engineer here at SquaredUp. And today we're going to be diving into building out the ultimate SCOM console, getting used to SquaredUp and understanding how to navigate. And hopefully we're going to look at building some dashboards as well. So today's session goals, very straightforward. We're going to create a dashboard for a team to manage alerts, view health and performance. We're also going to understand the broad scoping of a NOC dashboard to show high-level information and share it. We'll then also use this dashboard as a jump point to investigate and resolve an issue. So we'll see what's happening in our internal SCOM environment. And we'll also take a quick look at integrations to understand how critical data can be consolidated into a single pane of glass, or a pane of glass, as we heard yesterday. So with that in mind, we're just going to talk very briefly about the team-specific dashboard. We're going to focus this dashboard for a small set of objects owned by an application team. This is going to utilize a SCOM group, and we're going to include health, alerts, and performance in this dashboard. So some of that real core SCOM data. We're then going to add this dashboard to a team folder. Now, this is very important. That team doesn't want everyone else to be able to see that dashboard, and they also want to be able to edit and possibly create more dashboards within that folder. One thing you'll see very commonly as we move through the demos today is that a lot of the features are shared across all of the SquaredUp products. So team folders, open access, the dashboard designer, these are all shared features. We'll try and cover them briefly in each session so that you're familiar and aware of what each of them are. But just in case you see any doubling up, just want to highlight why that's happening. So this is going to be pretty demo heavy. There's very few slides in today's session. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump straight into SquaredUp. Now, this is running 5.1, the release candidate of which is now available. Let me just zoom that in a bit for you. The first thing that we're going to do is just take a quick look at the group we're going to be using for this. So as I mentioned, it's a SCOM group, which means that I can search for this up in the top right-hand corner. And you'll see when I search for Sales App that we have our mysterious Sales App application there. That's what we'll be looking at in the next session about enterprise applications. We'll actually see some other objects here. And if I just search for grouping, this is what we're going to be looking at. Now, drilling into this object, this is a SCOM group, we'll see the components that make up that group. This group is a pretty common structure within the SCOM world. We've got an overarching group which contains subgroups which actually contain computer objects. So in this case, this may be the way that you group your applications, the way that you may be using this for notifications, perhaps. It may also be used for overrides. So we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're going to show you some advanced features on how to scope some tiles so that you can get the most out of SquaredUp without having to add more load to SCOM. But this is the group that we will be using. And if I just drill into the SQL objects here, you'll see the members here are actually just server objects. So there's a nice relationship model for us there. We'll have drill downs and everything else that we'd expect from SquaredUp and SCOM. And we'll start mapping that into a dashboard now. The first thing that I want to do, though, is create a folder for this dashboard. Now, with team folders, if you convert a folder to a team folder, you can't then move other dashboards into it. You can do it using the JSON, but that's not the most intuitive of ways. So I'm going to start with a folder that will later convert to a team folder. I'm going to be doing this for the A team today. We're going to add those permissions in a little bit, but one thing I just want to highlight is now that we've created this folder, the plus button has moved into this lower down menu. If I come back to the top level, you see that plus is on the top bar. That's where we created our our folder. And when you move into the folder, that's where the dashboard is going to be created. So you can nest these really, really simply by just navigating to where you want the dashboard to be, and that's where it will then appear. So into A team, I'm going to either click the plus to create a new dashboard, or I'm going to click create a new dashboard. And this is where we start to see the templates that are the SquaredUp dashboard designer. I'm just going to touch on this a little bit like Paul did in his session. So we're able to customize these views how we want to. We do also help you get started by providing these templates. They are powerful, they're super, super simple to use, and they are highly customizable. So if I just select this 2 rows, one with a single column, one with 3 columns, you may want to add new rows, split tiles, add new columns. It's all very easy to use. It's drag and drop. You can adjust columns very, very simply using the slider here. You should be able to really customize this and make the layouts that you require. Now, as Paul spent spent a good amount of time on that in his session. I'm not going to spend too much more time. But when we drop into the tile selection, once we pick our initial template, you'll notice that we have different data available than we saw in Dashboard Server. And this is where we sit on top of SCOM. For each tile that you see here, when you hover, you'll either see a plus or you won't see a plus. And what that means is that there's different visualizations within each of these. Today, we're mostly going to be focusing this session on the status, alerts, and performance data. Majority of these tiles are data from SCOM, so monitors, matrix, SLA, SCOM, task. You can also utilize the Visio tile to light up health states from SCOM, and the image tile is what I politely refer to as the lazy man's Visio, where you can select an image and then drag and drop icons from your objects on top of that image. But both of those are also SCOM data, and then there are the other visualizations for external data that you'll see throughout the sessions today. So what I want to do as a starting point, as this dashboard is going to be for a particular application team, they want to have a nice summary of information. So I'm going to start by adding a donut. This is going to be a nice way of breaking out the health state of multiple objects into a nice, easy to understand view. And I'm going to do this for 3 of those subgroups that we saw a moment ago. When we choose our scope, we can map in individual objects here. So if I wanted to just put in each of these web servers, I could do so very easily. But unfortunately, this isn't then a dynamic view. That's a set list of objects that will constantly be on this dashboard. Useful in a majority of cases, but if you want a nice dynamically updating dashboard, my recommendation is always going to be use either the group or the advanced scoping options. You can specify a group in here, sales app web as an example, but this is just going to give you one object for that group. So you see there's just one there. If you want to show the members of that group, then what you're going to want to do is take that group and enter it into the group scope. And this is then going to give you the members of the group. So a nice way of being able to break that down. I'm not going to touch on advanced just yet. We're going to look at that in a little bit, but that's another way of creating dynamic views. And where this is just a SCOM group, this is actually a SCOM group that's going to populate dynamically based on some regex and using the computer names of the objects to populate. So once a new server is deployed into the environment that contains that server name or partial of that server name, and that wildcard, it will then update this tile as well. So you don't ever have to change the dashboard. It all just takes care of itself. So we've chosen our group. Let's just add in our legend. I'm going to hit done, and then I'm going to repeat the process a couple of times. So first of all, I'm just going to add a couple of new columns so that we've got a nice 3 split here. I'm going to add in the app servers. I'm going to click configure tile once more. We're just going to run through that process once again. Choose our donut, select our group. I'm going to choose the application group this time. So hit show legend. And finally, let's just do this for the SQL objects. And there is one other group in this, one other subgroup in this group, but we're just going to ignore that one for today. So sales app SQL. Okay, real simple, very, very easy to understand. The components within this application, we've got 3 healthy web servers, 2 healthy app servers, and 1 of each unhealthy and healthy SQL objects as well. So that's nice and simple. Summary information, super, super easy to bring into a dashboard. Now, let's add some performance data. The team that owns this dashboard and this application, they want to see connections from both the front end and also the back end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new tile. I'm going to add in this time the performance visualization. I'm going to call this one connections. Have that web on the front end of that. I'm going to add a line graph. And then I'm going to use the same grouping that we had before, because we don't need to do anything crazy here to make this work. We can just use that same scoping across these tiles. Very, very easy to take that one scope and apply it in multiple places across a single dashboard. So just choose Sales App Web. Now, nothing is specified yet because we haven't picked our metric. So when I come into metrics, SquaredUp knows what objects we're talking about here. We have computer objects in there, and related to those are actually the IIS objects as well. So when I click into this box, it's just going to present the metrics that are available. It's super easy. And I'm just going to search for connections, and we can see current connections there. So that's nice and quick. I might want to change the way this is presented. So for example, it was a percentage metric. If you notice down here, got 100 there. It's not got anything on it at the moment, but if I hit percent, it's going to show us percent. You can do the same for bytes, megabytes, and seconds. Not useful in this case. We're just going to leave that as blank. And on the other option there, in the time frame option, we have page time frame or specific time frame. Now, if you're looking for a nice way to update a dashboard quickly, leaving this on page time frame is going to allow you to change multiple tiles at once using our page time frame picker that we'll look at in just a moment. So I'm going to leave that there. And there are also options here to use top N. We're going to look at this more in the knock dashboard in a moment, but if you did want to filter that down from a large data set, it's nice and easy. Data range gives you the option to change the sort of size of the axis here. So if it was a percentage, it would give you 0 to 100. We're going to just leave this on fit to data, and there are custom options available if you have a specific use case. And then finally, we have the option to change the height of the graph itself. Let's see if I can get that back to 200. And then you can also choose the label down here at the bottom. And in Paul's session, you saw that you can do some simple jQuery to split on things like full stops to be able to cut down the label there. And sometimes it can be quite long, so that's a nice way of being able to present that differently. So we've got one metric, that's the front-facing metric. Let's have a look at the back end. So SQL connections. Now, this is where things get a little bit more complicated. If we map in the computer objects into this view, we have the relationships for all the databases related to those computer objects. So when I go here and I type in sales app SQL and come to metric, I'm going to search for our connections here. And when I select DB active connections, you'll notice that we've got a whole bunch of other databases here. Some of the common databases associated with SQL, and then also some SolarWinds information. We want to filter some of those out, but how do we do that given that we've specified the same group that we used above? And it's actually quite intuitive. As long as you understand the sort of classes and the display names of objects, which isn't something too technical, we can take this group that we have here, we can flip over to our advanced scope, and in our group option, I can just use that same group. That won't change anything by itself. We've still got all those objects, but then we can filter this down. So if I go to class, I'm going to choose databases, SQL database, nice and simple, right? When I click that, nothing has changed once again. So what do we do next? We're then going to use a property against these objects. Now, you'll see we have this one database here called order proc platform, and that's the one that we want to use. Now, before I do this, there is a nice link to our knowledge base that details how to do this, the properties that are available, and how to access them. I know the display name is what I want to choose here, so I am just going to do display name equals, use that name, click out of the box, and that's now filtered down to those specific objects. That is a dynamic way of updating this performance tile. If you wanted this to be static, you could, of course, just specify that single display name in the list scope and just map in the objects that you want. But if you were to scale this up at any point, or this wasn't something as specific as a database metric, you may want to utilize this dynamic option. So, a little bit of health, a little bit of performance. What can we add next? You've guessed it, we're going to add some alerting information. And the really cool thing about the alerts tile is we have several ways of being able to filter this down. I've just clicked the plus in between these two rows, and it's added us a new tile in the middle. And when I click configure and go to our alerts tile, I'm going to use the list. And in this case, we're just going to go for open alerts, and leave that one on 12 hours so that we know exactly what we've got. So we've got a sub-label here. I should have mentioned this with the performance tiles as well. We're just going to add that into those two. What we can see here is the scoping options are the same. There is some dissimilarities here. If we choose criterion, we use display name. We're actually looking at the name of the alert, not the name of the object. But that's not too important for this use case because we're just going to use the same group we used before, so sales app grouping. And that's going to show us any alerts related to any of the objects in those subgroups. So nice and easy, all in one view, using that same scoping options. We can, of course, filter this down. If you wanted to show just closed alerts, you can show just the high priority or error severity, so critical alerts in that case. This is a really simple way of being able to filter down these views so you don't get too much back. And similarly with the performance tiles, we also have a page time frame option as well, which I'm going to select here. So now all of these tiles match. They're all showing 12 hours, as we've highlighted there. And we also have the option there to sort if you wanted to break them down by any of those properties against them. I'll leave that as default for the moment. We can limit the number that are presented to us. If you don't select this, it is going to just give you all of them. As you're designing this, it's only going to give you the top 5 anyway, but once you come out of edit mode, it will list them all in one go. It can be very cluttered. So I'm just going to leave that as 5. It will give you a show more option here to be able to expand that list so that you can see as many alerts as match the criteria that you specified. And finally, you can also use the columns here to be able to specify specific things. Now, first thing I'm going to do, I'm a fan of capitalization, So I'm just going to add in a new name. Should probably check this column here so we can see that. And you can see each of these just need a little update just to soothe my soul, as it were. So I'm just going to add that in. So we've now got the name as well that we missed there. We've got the display name, path, state, and raised. Great. Really basic. That's what you'll find in the SCOM console and a number of the alert views. But if you want to enhance that and add in any additional information, so properties against alerts, you can click this Show Hidden Columns button. And quite commonly, what I see in customer environments is custom fields used against their alerts. Now, these can be used to do multiple things. In many cases, it's as simple as just assigning it to the correct user base so they can actually action information. More commonly, I see in our alerts tile here is just adding in something as simple as the repeat count so that you can see those rule-based alerts and how often they're triggering. I'm not going to make any changes here. I'm just going to click Hide the Hidden Columns and then hit Done. And we now have our alerts tile. So again, we have this core data from SCOM for this application team. They know exactly what's going on with this environment. Pretty much anything that they need to access, they can drill down into. So they want to see longer stats for the performance metrics, click into the graph. The health state, click into that, and they'll be able to see the specific object for that segment. And then they'll also be able to examine that information through perspectives. And what we're going to do finally is just give us ourselves a nice inline view for all of the objects in this group. And for this one, we're going to use our matrix tile. So this is going to be for the server health. So I'm going to click Configure once more. I'm going to choose our monitors tile, matrix tile there. And when I come to scope, once more, we'll see these options. And one thing that you will see straight off the bat is when I go to sales app grouping this time around, we're not getting anything useful. This is just showing us those members of that group as we saw on the status tile. And for the way that this tile works, you need to specify the specific class of object that actually has the monitoring in place that you want to display. So I'm going to choose advanced once more. I'm going to choose our sales app grouping, and I'm just going to choose our Windows computer class. If I can type it today, there we go. You'll see instantly, within just a few clicks, we've specified a little bit of scoping, and we now have access to all of the core OS information for these objects. The matrix tile, very, very powerful. Gives you a really, really nice inline view of some core KPIs. You can expose properties, use SLA gauges, specific monitor health, lots and lots of ways of being able to add information in here. It's super customizable. Check out the knowledge base article that's linked to from here, and that'll give you a full rundown of everything that's possible. And I'm just going to show, we provide some of the out-of-the-box views for common objects, so Windows Server, IIS objects, SQL objects, etc. And what you can do is you can actually customize these. So if I come to custom here, this is the JSON template for this specific tile. And what you can do is you can add in your own what we call cell tiles. So this is this minor thing that we see here. The matrix tile is obviously the bigger thing, the grand tile on the dashboard, but the cell tiles are the individual columns that we see. And if you wanted to amend or adjust any of this, perhaps you wanted to see a different metric, it's as simple as coming in here and updating it. If, for example, you wanted to take one and add a new metric, simple as just copying that segment. JSON, for those of you who are familiar, is super, super intuitive. For those of you who aren't, you basically just want to read that knowledge base article. It took me a little while to get used to it, and I'm sure it will for anyone else. I'm going to add that into here. We might want to update something. I'm not going to change any metrics here. I'm just going to type hello to show you what's possible. And you'll see we've got CPU, memory, or CPU's CPU and memory. When I hit apply, we've now got a hello column as well. Update that with whatever you want, any property against these objects, SLA gauges, as I say, and that will give you a fantastic view into the objects that you scope in. Finally, the display option gives you the option to just make it bigger. So those of you who are using open access on wall screens, selecting large is going to be much easier to see from a distance than the default view. Bear in mind, I am zooming in my browser quite heavily here, so the names truncate. And if you have fewer columns, you can also make it fit a little bit better. And this also accepts the same custom label adjustments, so some split slices, etc., to be able to break down this view into something a little bit easier to read. I'm going to hit default, hit done, and we now have a dashboard for our application team. So as a draft, this is available to the user who has created it. So you'll see on the navigation bar, this is in italics. That's yours. No one else can see it. If you want to be able to provide this to the other users, you have two options. The first one, obviously, you have to hit publish. They're not going to be able to see it if it's only available to you. And that's now available on the nav bar under the A team folder that we created for any user who logs in. Now, Really, really importantly, that means that they must use a SquaredUp license, but not everyone needs one. The app teams, they may have their own tools to monitor. They just want basic information from the OS, from SCOM. And this kind of dashboard is really, really going to give them that information. If you want to share this with that team without providing them with a user license, that's where open access comes in. And this share button up in the top right-hand corner gives you access to the open access feature. I'll enable that one. It's going to take a quick snapshot of the dashboard. It's going to take an understanding of the scope so that it can't be adjusted or manipulated by external sources for security reasons. And then we now have this obfuscated URL that you can share with that team. All the dashboards in SquaredUp refresh every 60 seconds, including open access. And they now have this really, really simple to see, simple to use dashboard that gives them access to the base information that they need. And one of the really important things to focus on when you are building dashboards is to make sure that they are scoped to the users who are going to consume them. They want to see specific KPIs, and because of how easy these dashboards are to create, you can give them the view that they require quite easily. And if you give them this dashboard and half of them are happy with them, half of them aren't, come up to the top, hit settings, there's a clone button, give them the second dashboard that has the KPIs the other users want, and then everyone's happy. Very, very easy to just amend these tiles. So if you wanted to come into SQL connections, perhaps change the metric here just by clicking into the field, you can really easily set that up for other users. So really, really basic dashboard. The premise here is to give you an understanding of how easy they are to create. I know I've used that phrasing a lot in this session, but I've been using SquaredUp for so many years now that it's very, very intuitive. I did try to pick up Grafana at one point. Not my bag. Lots of coding and not enough picker experience. I'm a very simple man, me. So we now have this sales app dashboard. So that's our first use case. That was one of our session goals that we've now achieved. We just jump back to our slides, and we're going to move on to a NOC dashboard. Now, NOC dashboards are generally overviews for service desks or support or infrastructure teams. They give access to large amounts of information filtered down to give them information that's actionable. So what I mean by that is they'll use things like classes, which are very broad in scope. They'll show you everything that matches that discovered class. So something like SQL has a pretty large base of objects that you'll be able to view. Windows Computer, another common one, and then also large groups, so the All Windows Computers group. And we're going to use those to populate the dashboards, and a number of our out-of-the-box dashboards use scopes like these because they exist in all environments. Generally, they also use Donut for summary tiles. They just give you high-level information without necessarily too much granular detail so that you can share that with a wider audience who don't necessarily need to see all the nitty-gritty KPIs. They just want to know, is the environment healthy across a large number of objects. So the donut summary tiles are a great way to achieve that. We also provide you with top-end performance. The way that these queries are tuned are absolutely spectacular. We have seen this environments where they have sort of 10,000 monitored objects, I think was the use case that we developed this on. And they can display a top 5 performance graph for something like high CPU, and it returns incredibly quickly. It's really, really amazing how that works. So we can query those large scopes and give you just the pertinent information, the stuff that's actionable, the stuff that needs looking at to really make that NOC dashboard effective. And similarly, that's how you would view the performance and work with the alerts as well. So again, broad scoping and being able to manage those alerts, update resolution states and the like, and also just generally be able to click in and learn more is quite useful on these NOC dashboards as well. And we can also view the performance there for not just what's on the dashboard, but the long-term data as well. So back into the dashboard designer. Do you know, I have forgotten how to convert this into, I had to convert this into a team folder. So let me just run through that just before I dive in. So we have our folder here. This is our team folder for the A team. If I select the folder up in the top right-hand corner, we now can convert this to a team folder. Apologies for missing this a moment ago. Hit convert. That's now a team folder with permissions. We see this section now. We can add in specific users. So perhaps Paul needs to be able to author within this folder. We can add him there. We don't want anyone else to see this folder, so we can hide that from them. And now Paul has an area where he can view a dashboard. No one else can access it. Perhaps there's an AD group that require just view permissions that you want to provide that to. That's a really great way of issuing out those permissions. Any user that's a SCOM admin is also a SquaredUp admin as well, so just to highlight that as well. Apologies. So let's jump back to the NOC dashboard. So what we're going to do, first of all, is just take a look at how we've created this NOC dashboard. This is one of the out-of-the-box dashboards that's been adjusted slightly just to showcase some of the features here. The broad scoping that I mentioned, when you're looking at alerts, it can be as broad as unscoped entirely. So this is just going to show any open alerts in the environment. You can, of course, filter this down so that it only shows the error alerts. Again, that's the actionable information, the things that need to be looked at immediately, and then break out another tile for your warning and info, stuff that doesn't necessarily need to be looked at right now, but that's good to know about. We can also use groups and classes. So in this case, on the overview for servers, we're using the Windows Server 2016 and 1709 Plus computer class. And in our CPU % used tile here, we're also using the All Windows Computers group. So across this dashboard, we're actually creating quite a large data set to be able to view this information. Now, from here, we have a number of things that we need to look at. There is a computer object that's unhealthy. We have 18 critical alerts. We can list out those alerts in any way we choose as well. We can also filter in just the unhealthy objects as well. A dashboard that contains 200 objects and there are 3 objects that are unhealthy, it's not only going to be slow to load, but you're also going to have to filter through to find the critical objects. So using properties against these objects is really a nice way of being able to filter them in. In this tile, we've shown our enterprise applications, our unhealthy enterprise applications. This one down here, we've actually just used it for servers. And this is the matrix tile again, giving you access to the data available for those objects. So the next thing that we want to do here is actually start to examine some of the information. Now, commonly, your service desk have used the SCOM console. They've been in it. They've not liked it, but they've possibly been forced to use it day in, day out for a number of years and are sick of it, much like all of us have been at some point in our lives. The SquaredUp UI will give you access to everything that you can do in the SCOM console for alerts. So in our alert tile here, we can take any one of these, so whichever alert this is. I can update that resolution state. I can assign it to a particular team. I can add in a comment to say anything I want to at all. And if I update that, that's now represented in the SCOM console as well. So if you're using this for notification subscriptions and updated resolution states trigger an email, that's a great way of being able to just give you a really easy way to actually send out those emails. You can do that for multiple alerts by just using the checkbox at the end here, and that will provide the same change to resolution state and comment on each of those. What we can also do is drill down into this information. So any of these alerts have information, deeper information when you drill in. So clicking into the C drive, this % logical disk free space low alert here, you see all of the common information, the description, the history. We can update this resolution state. We can say hello. You'll see that here. You can see I did that, and someone's going to call me out for that later. But what you'll also see is the hosting stack, the information back up to the parent object, any affected applications, whether it's distributed applications or SquaredUp's enterprise applications. And again, your product and company knowledge. Product knowledge out of the management packs generally will give you a lot of information around why this has triggered. If it's your own custom monitoring, you may provide that into your company knowledge. And you can also edit this within SquaredUp as well. So if you want to provide your own knowledge base within the SCOM and SquaredUp experience, company knowledge is where you will want to go, and this will save this back into SCOM for any time this alert triggers, giving you all the information you need at your fingertips. Accepts HTML, I think it's Markdown as well, so it'll take some basic tables and the like, allowing you to provide your process notes in there for whoever sees this alert next time around. And finally, you have the context down the bottom as well, so the last sampled value and any other information available. So really, really similar experience to SCOM. You don't have multiple tabs to click through when you open an alert in SCOM console. It's all available here. But you do have multiple perspectives, and this is what we see in this ribbon. Now, the alert perspective is the default one. That's the first one you're going to hit whenever you open one. You will then also see either a monitor or a rule perspective, depending on what type of alert this is, what's triggered it. either way, with each of these, you'll be able to see the monitor information, the MP it belongs into, description, etc., as well as the specific configuration for this particular object. And we can see here in this case, we've actually got some overrides in place. This has been very, very badly tuned to always trigger, but it's for demo purposes, but you can see where that's stored as well. And then finally, at the bottom, you also have the health state changes as well. Any of you who have used Health Explorer will be very familiar with this. It's just going to give you the flip-flop of whenever it's changing health state. Really great way of being able to see when a monitor needs some further tuning to make sure it's actually effective. And then finally, the other out-of-the-box view that you'll see is the analytics view. Now, what you don't get in SCOM Console without having to create a report is some kind of insight into the alert against the environment or the particular object. So in this case, we're looking at a data warehouse query to show us the average time to close for this specific alert. Someone's going to get in trouble for this one. You'll see how often it's triggered against this particular object. A bit confusing, that one. We'll try and figure that out later. But the most recent is also quite useful. And what you can do here is, because this is just an alert in SquaredUp and SCOM, is we've actually linked this. So you can drill into any of these and it'll take you through to the same alert drill down, but for that particular time that the alert triggered. So you can see the context, you'll be able to see the health change events, etc., to understand why this has triggered. And again, you'll also have access to this against all of the objects in the environment, and this will take you through to that specific alert as well. Now, that's all good and well. Just the SCOM data, really, really awesome. You know, this is a different way of presenting it. It's much more intuitive than the SCOM console. But what you can also do is you can also build your own views on top of alerts. And that's what we've done here in this free space view. What we've actually done is we've targeted this at this particular alert. So this is always going to be visible on an alert that matches that criteria. And we've utilized our performance information. It's a low disk alert. And we've basically looked at this metric, so free space, against this object over a certain time frame. And we've chosen the last 24 hours on this one, but you can default that to page time frame for 12 hours. And you can also set a static value as well. So low disk, probably you want to look at something a bit longer, something like 30 days worth of information. It's going to give you that very, very easily every time you open this alert. And that means that alongside your configuration via the monitor view, the reason it's triggered based on the alert, and then also your performance metric, which is going to help you to understand, you know, has this triggered recently? Is this something that's been a slow decline or a massive spike recently? You should be able to, within just a few clicks, pinpoint when this actually started and why that may have happened. So a really nice way of, again, enhancing that understanding from that common data in SCOM. Now, another aspect of this, so this would be part of the investigation. What if you actually wanted to remediate an issue? So, you know, fixing something very simply. If we come back to our alert view, we should be able to see an alert here based on a Windows service not running. Now, if I drill into this, we'll see some really important information. The first one is it's based on one of our enterprise applications. So this is actually a member of that app. So this may be critical to that application running. And in fact, this application is actually unhealthy at the moment. So we may already understand why. Now, the ability to actually run SCOM agent tasks can help you not just investigate issues. And what I mean by that is if I come through to a server object, I can use the task button and I can view something as simple as ipconfig without having to RDP onto the box or open up PowerShell. However you may get this information normally, you'll be presented with this. But you can also use this to fix issues, and building in agent tasks into your SCOM experience will help you cut down on the amount of time it takes to resolve issues, because it's as simple as drilling down into the object that's unhealthy, understanding why it has triggered. In this case, our root cause view is providing that information via the monitor, which is the service is not running. You can also see that alert that we were just viewing. And from here, we can either create our own view. In this case, we've just created one called Windows Service. And then we can access our task ribbon to start and stop that service. We can even just add buttons to our hotbar here to be able to say, well, the service should be running. It's not. The application is unhealthy. One click. I've now provided some form of remediation to actually fix this issue. And it really is as simple as that. SquaredUp should give you a much better experience than the SCOM console when it comes to not just viewing the data, but also actually examining and then resolving issues as well. The final thing that I want to show you in relation to this particular aspect, the knock dashboard, is also maintenance mode. It's a common requirement to be able to use maintenance mode on objects if you're performing a change, or perhaps you're just rebooting it for patching, any of those common use cases, you do want to also be able to manage maintenance mode in SquaredUp, and it's the same experience. It's just choosing the maintenance mode button here instead of task, providing your duration. There's some defaults there, and also specific number of minutes as well as a specific date time. If your change window runs from 9 till 5, you probably want to enter that here. And you can also specify your reasons, and this is the same as you'll find in the SCOM console. And when you enter a comment here, I'm going to use Ashwas here once more because I'm cheeky. I'm going to hit update, and we'll now see this information in SquaredUp. This object displays this icon on any dashboard it's contained within. You have the maintenance mode button when you drill into it, and one click of that gives you access to the comment that was made, the user who did it, as well as the time range that it's in for. So again, giving you that SCOM experience in a portal that's much easier to use, and without having to just generally work with the SCOM console, which is not fun for most of us. Finally, I've hit disable there. I've taken that out of maintenance mode, so you can manage that as well. So just going to jump back to the slides very briefly. Integrations are something you've heard about hopefully all day today and all day yesterday. This is our most powerful tool sets. We sit on top of SCOM and Azure. That's really nice underlying tools to be able to visualize data, but that's not the only place you want to gain the data from. And you've already heard over the last, over Paul's session as well, that there's tiles for web APIs, PowerShell, SQL, there's web content, there's different visualizations, and really importantly, none of that data is stored in SquaredUp. Now, that's really, really quite cool because you don't duplicate data. It means that you're always accessing live information from all of these tools without ever having to store it in yet another database for you to manage. This is just going to request that information when you need it. And alongside your SCOM data, this can be absolutely incredible to view in one place, no longer having to jump between multiple portals. So we're just going to take a little look about how that looks in the SCOM world. And you'll notice as well, much like I mentioned earlier, these tool sets are common between each of the products. There is lots and lots of common features because they're essentially the same code base, and it seems a bit weird and a bit rude of us to only give one of those tools access to, say, the web API tile and those visualizations. We want it to be a common experience. So let's take a look at some of that data. We're actually looking at an application server here. The first thing that I want to know is, do we have any open instance and changes against this object? And really, really powerfully, in ServiceNow, we have a really massive CMDB that contains all of the asset properties. And what we're able to do is build these views on these common types. So in this case, we're looking at Windows Server. So this is a class in this case. And we're able to visualize this information on top of every object that matches that class. So choosing that, it will appear on every Windows computer. And when I drop into the tiles, we get access to our mustache picker. So for those of you who aren't familiar, this gives you access to the properties of the scope tiles that you have that you're viewing. So in this case, Windows Computer has lots. We have display name, we have IP address, we have the organizational unit that the object is in AD. There's plenty of data here that you may want to use within your queries, and this is utilized in any of the integration tiles. So querying a SQL database is an example, to be able to request patching information from SCCM. Being able to look at the recent application deployments from there as well can be quite useful. In terms of external sources, ticketing information, you may want to look at log information. So as an example, Splunk, common properties between them, the display name is going to be the same in both, so we can use that within our queries. So hopefully you should be able to build these views into lots of different tools using that object model and the information available from SCOM. And this is just going to enhance your understanding from all those different viewpoints, all of this information. And this is actually using log analytics here to look at changes against this particular object. Another aspect that this is useful for is if you're looking at applications. Now, this is the next session that we're going to look into. But here in this case, our sales app, we have computer objects. We have display names for these computer objects. And we can once again query ServiceNow for any open instance and changes against those objects. So it's really, really useful to be able to see any open information from these different tool sets, even if it's down to things like application monitoring from New Relic, application insights, Splunk. The tools really are out there amongst all of your teams. They'll have many of them deployed. And just as a really, really last example of this, you'll see that this particular dashboard, none of this data is stored in SCOM. None of this data is stored in SquaredUp. This is all live information from a multitude of tools on a dashboard that we can share using open access across wider teams. And we can really, really display this information however we use, using the same visualizations that we have for our SCOM data. So really, 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 really useful. I could talk about this for days. I would try and list all the tools that this work for, but because of the fact that we now have the PowerShell tile, the options really are limitless. There's no limitations on what you can query and how you can present the data. And this is only going to get better over time as well. So you see on this page, we've got application monitoring, SolarWinds information for our infrastructure, Pingdom querying our external sources, our web tests from multiple locations around the world, as well as our ITSM data from ServiceNow. And I think we have PagerDuty here as well. So it's external alerting platforms, all within one portal, giving your users a common experience of how they consume this data. And that means that you can just share this very easily amongst different teams.